Did you write this for machines? Or people? Clara smirked Nathan, the freshly appointed CFO, flicking the corner of her printed binder like it might bite him. 3 slides in. That's all she got. 3. He held her 80-page financial risk model like it was contaminated, then dropped it onto the oak boardroom table with a thud that seemed to echo off the glass walls. The pause stretched so long it could have been clocked in fiscal quarters. Nathan slid out his version, a 3-page slide deck filled with gradients and stock photos. Clara Morales, 52, had spent 6 weeks building scenario trees and stress paths demanded by the lead investor's legal team. Her model didn't just forecast, it safeguarded. Every assumption was tagged, every clause footnoted, and legal risk and operations had already signed off. Now in 2023, inside the Chicago headquarters of Grant & Lynn Capital, this fast-tracked Ivy League golden boy was replacing it with something he'd clearly assembled during a cold brew rush. Her voice stayed steady, though her chest tightened. Nathan, the investors, specifically requested stress case analysis with compliance notes tied to the deliverables. Your version. He cut her off with a dismissive laugh. Relax. We're selling a vision, not putting them to sleep. The execs chuckled. Clara didn't. It was the suffocating kind of silence that comes when a dozen late nights and 12 years of unbroken performance are bulldozed by someone who's never paid the price for being wrong. Nathan clicked through his deck, with the swagger of a man who believed revenue projections were a mood, not math. See simple. Executives want confidence, not data. Clara's stomach turned. Some of the board members nodded, eyes glazed, lulled by buzzwords and branding slides. Not one asked about the stress curves. No one noticed the missing legal disclaimer in the net revenue projections, a clause embedded in the original term sheet essential for investor approval. She glanced at Margaret, the general counsel. No rescue there. Arms crossed, gaze fixed, she looked more like a spectator at a slow-motion train wreck than an ally. Clara turned back to her binder, abandoned on the table like a body no one wanted to claim. 12 years of loyalty and precision tossed aside for 3 pages of polish. She didn't argue, not yet. But she was already memorizing every face in the room. They could keep their vibes. She still had the receipts. No rescue there. Clara's eyes returned to her binder, still lying abandoned on the table like a body no one wanted to claim. She had always been the numbers person, precise, thorough, never political, and for 12 years, that had been enough. But now they wanted flash over substance, vibes instead of safeguards. And Nathan embodied that shift. She could already imagine the future when the deal collapsed. Someone would ask, "Where were the stress tests?" And another would murmur, "Didn't Clara used to handle that?" But by then, she'd be gone. In her mind, the tombstone for her job was already carved. She stayed silent, closing her laptop slowly as if it physically hurt. Nathan moved on to a pie chart colored like a candy aisle. Clara memorized every face in that room, every eye that looked away, every cowardly smirk. The next morning, her coffee wasn't finished brewing before Nathan summoned her, like some self-styled emperor of finance. She entered, posture straight, voice calm, carrying a printed copy of the investor agreement. 2 clauses were circled in red. Clauses 6.3 and 6.8, she said, setting it on his desk. These disclaimers aren't optional, they're legal prerequisites. Without them, the model isn't compliant. Nathan didn't look up from his phone. He smirked. Clara, this is why people hate working with finance. You obsess over hypotheticals. Investors don't want encyclopedias, they want momentum. She blinked. They want legal compliance. Now he looked up, blue eyes full of polished condescension. You're not a deal maker. You're a spreadsheet gremlin. It stung just enough for him to notice. He waved her off like a bad waiter. I'll take it from here. Clara gathered her papers, nodded once, and left with the steady calm of someone who had already mapped the escape route from a burning building. The following morning she arrived as usual. checked emails, answered 3 from compliance. She hadn't finished her oatmeal when the ping came from HR. "Can you stop by?" It felt like stepping into a mausoleum. The HR rep Stacy, or maybe Tracy, not that it mattered, wore the thin smile of someone whose job was pressing the eject button, offering a branded tote bag on the way out. "Due to restructuring, your role is being made redundant effective immediately." Redundant. Like a line of code that no longer compiled. Clara glanced at the man from operations beside her, a mid-level shadow avoiding her eyes as if she were contagious. No farewell? No thank you. Not even a nod to the $300 million valuation she'd helped build. Just an NDA packet, a severance check in silence that smelled of printer toner and cowardice. 5 minutes later, security appeared. Of course. She was allowed 1 banker's box, 1 mug of paperweight, and a dried succulent she'd forgotten to water. They hovered as she packed like she might suddenly hack into the servers. What they didn't know, what Nathan never bothered to check, was that she had never saved her real models on the company cloud. The ones with legal scaffolding, risk simulations, and compliance triggers. They lived elsewhere. Time-stamped, secured. Hers. Clara didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't throw coffee like a Netflix heroine. She walked out, heels echoing down the sterile hallway, her box strangely light in her arms. If you want to see exactly what happened when my next move made the boardroom implode, make sure you subscribe now, because the next chapter is where the real chaos begins. In the parking garage, surrounded by exhaust and her own heartbeat, she did one thing she called her lawyer. "Remember that clause we negotiated back in 2014, she asked, steady as a surgeon. "I think it's time to cash it in." "God bless your paranoid little heart," Priya murmured, flipping through the contract like it was a cursed scroll. They sat in their old college haunt, a cafe smelling of burnt toast and betrayal. Priya wasn't just a lawyer. She was a cobra in designer heels, the kind who once made a hedge fund CFO cry in a deposition and sent him muffins the next day. Her grin was razor sharp. Page 17. Clause 8.4.2. Upon termination without cause, all original financial models, simulations, and derivative logic revert to employee ownership, including any IP built independently or off-company infrastructure. Clara leaned back, letting it settle like a good whiskey. Airtight. The clause wasn't vague, it was airtight. Clara had crafted it a decade earlier, back when Grant and Lynn Capital still worked out of a co-working space, and the founders signed every contract themselves. She'd pushed for it after watching another startup steal an engineer's algorithm, then fire him before their IPO. Back then, they'd laughed. "You really think we'd screw you over like that?" She'd said nothing, just had it written in. And now, here they were. "What exactly reverts?" Priya asked. Clara slid a beige flash drive across the table. It looked harmless enough, cheap, forgettable. But it was the holy grail of Series D diligence, a complete simulation framework for investor projections, with compliance mapping, scenario stress paths, and a cascading logic tree she'd refined over 4 years. "Everything they need to close the deal," Clara said. "Everything they don't have now." Priya plugged it into her laptop, scanning the file tree. "Tell me you have timestamps. 4 versions. All registered, all hashed. Never touched their cloud, I never trusted them." From day one, Clara had kept her best work off the grid. She'd seen Nathan coming long before he had a title. She'd seen plenty of golden boys with polished smiles and flashy pitch decks rise fast, then implode, taking other people's legacies with them. She wasn't going to be collateral damage. While they obsessed over style, she built the scaffolding under the entire financial projection strategy alone, at night, backed up, encrypted, copyrighted, trademarked under her own LLC, formed the year Nathan was still in grad school. "They don't just need the files," she said. "They need the rights to use the logic. And I never signed those away." Priya grinned like she'd just won a bet. "You beautiful devil." Clara wasn't gloating. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. 12 years of building something real only to watch it get bulldozed by a man with a Pinterest resume and a 3-page slide deck. This wasn't about vindication, it was about reclaiming gravity. She looked out the cafe window as a bus rumbled past full of tired commuters. Somewhere Nathan was probably toasting an associate thinking he'd silenced her. Let him. The models were never his. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jen. 2 words, all caps. Holy shit. A second message pinged, then a third. Clara's old finance team, her Control Z crew group chat lit up like Times Square at midnight. Investor call was this morning, Jen wrote. It went nuclear. Nathan couldn't answer a single stress test question. Clara's lips twitched, not quite a smile. She stepped outside, phone to her ear before it rang twice. Jen's voice was hushed like she was hiding in a bathroom stall. He opened with one of those hideous pie charts, corporate rainbow vomit. Investors looked lost from the first slide. Clara leaned against a sun-warmed stone pillar, letting the late Chicago summer heat settle over her. Then they asked for your stress scenarios, the same ones you built for the last 3 rounds, Jen continued. You could see the moment he realized they weren't in the deck. He flipped through like a magician who'd lost the rabbit. Clara closed her eyes, picturing him sweating through his tailored suit. Lead investor Silveridge's guy asked if the projections were adjusted for the FTC's new B2B clause. Nathan didn't even know what he meant. Clara almost felt bad. Almost. And then Margaret jumped in, Jen said. Asked why the compliance disclaimers were missing. Nathan told them they felt too dense. Clara snorted. Board meeting got pushed right after. I wasn't in it, but word is, someone slammed a chair. Legal demanded to know who approved the new deck. One of the VCs muttered, "This is how the Rano started." Clara didn't laugh, but the tight coil in her chest loosened slightly. Jen's voice dropped lower. Silveridge is pausing. Deal's not dead, but it's definitely not alive. Smug rage wasn't loud. It didn't gloat or dance. It sat deep in her ribs like a slow-burning fire. Clara ended the call with a quiet, "Thanks." She walked 2 blocks in silence, then sat on a park bench across from the Grant and Lynn Tower. From her perch, she could see the 14th floor windows. Somewhere inside, Nathan was likely pacing, calling it a hiccup, maybe blaming Margaret, maybe blaming the investors for not getting the vision. She knew better. The vision wasn't the problem. The missing scaffolding was, and she still owned it. But Clara knew the truth. It had never been about vision. It was about rigor, guardrails, red flags that meant something. Now the scaffolding was gone, and everyone inside Grant and Lynn Capital was starting to feel the tilt. She opened her phone, tapped her notes app, typed 3 words, and let them sit. Then she took a slow breath, eyes still fixed on the glass tower above, and waited for the tremor. At 9:02 a.m. on Monday, Priya's email went out. By 9:07, the board's Slack was on fire. It was lean, surgical, 3 pages, polite but loaded like a sniper round. Intellectual property ownership and unauthorized derivative use of proprietary financial models, Clause 8.4.2. Clara had watched Priya type the last line the night before in a quiet wine bar, their laptops glowing over half-finished Syrah. Priya clicked send with a smirk. That should loosen some bowels. The letter stated that Clara's termination had triggered the reversion clause in her contract. Clause 8.4. 2 confirmed that the original financial model simulation scenario trees and derivative logic plus all legal scaffolding were her intellectual property, as of the day she was let go without cause. Enclosures followed a list of file names, all hashed and time-stamped copyright registrations, signed trademark filings, and notarized affidavits proving the models were developed independently under her LLC and never stored on company infrastructure. The closing paragraph was a scalpel. Continued use, reproduction, or reference without licensing could constitute federal IP infringement. Immediate cessation was advised unless a licensing agreement was negotiated. Clara read it once, then deleted it. The message had been delivered. That afternoon, the first Slack leak hit. Jen forwarded it to her with nothing but a popcorn emoji. Greg from Ops Wait. Did we really fire the only person who understood the models? Rachel from Legal Please. Tell me we got licensing rights in her separation agreement. Reply nope. Mark longtime board member Nathan told us she was overly technical and replaceable. Reaction thumbs down. Clara didn't respond. She didn't need to. Clara didn't call anyone. No cryptic posts, no smug emojis. She simply watched. She bought an overpriced pastry and browsed real estate listings, curious how far her severance might stretch if she vanished into the woods for a year. The power shift wasn't because she seized it, it was because they fumbled it. In their rush to install someone shinier, faster, and far less capable, they'd dropped the core. Grant and Lynn had been her quiet cathedral of logic and rigor. Now it was a circus, and the elephants had set the tent on fire. She stood at the edge of the chaos with no intention of stepping in. Not yet. 2 days after Priya's letter, the money froze officially in writing panic baked into every word. Silveridge halted the $100 million Series D, citing material deficiencies in risk modeling and compliance. Translation: where are the real numbers? Nathan spun like a ceiling fan on high. Slack threads became blame tornadoes. The investor deck was revised 12 times in 36 hours. Legal was CC'd on everything. PR resorted to Googling how to write a proactive crisis memo. And Clara, she was in a lakeside cafe 3 towns away, laptop open to dashboard alerts from a private scrape bot she'd set up years earlier. She watched red flags appear in real-time investor portals, locked internal audits flagged for full review burn rate projections showing payroll strain within 8 weeks. The cracks weren't forming, they were gaping open. On day 4 of the freeze, Priya's phone rang. She didn't need to check the number. "Let me guess," she said. "Nathan wants to talk." He did, through a mutual contact. The offer dripped with desperation, bring Clara back in quietly. No public acknowledgement, no apology. Just a quick consulting loop to clarify some legacy logic so the deal could limp forward. Clara didn't laugh. She just told Priya, "My availability is limited, and my rate is no longer salaried." The reply went out crisp, precise. Ms. Morales is reviewing several time-sensitive opportunities and cannot commit to any engagement that does not recognize the full value of her intellectual contributions. Any potential re-engagement must be under a premium consulting contract with a retroactive licensing clause billed at her independent rate. Terms non-negotiable. Clara didn't expect Nathan to reply, not with words anyway. His silence was louder. By the next day, the board had called an emergency session. Slack leaks flooded her phone again. "Rachel, from Legal. We need a way to recover those models without admitting IP infringement." Greg from Ops. "There isn't one. She owns them." Nathan finally appeared. "This is getting out of hand. Let's just offer her a 1-month retainer and move on." Thumbs down reaction 6. For amusement, Clara refreshed Grant and Lynn's Glassdoor page. 3 new anonymous reviews, all hinting at leadership instability and strategic blind spots. She closed the tab. This wasn't revenge, it was leverage. The kind you use with patience and a calculator. She pulled up the company's quarterly expense sheet, public data if you knew where to look, and ran her own burn rate projection, 8 weeks, maybe 10. Less if 2 vendors demanded early payment. She could have fixed it, tied the deal in a bow, and walked back in like a hero. But that would mean pretending Nathan was still in control. She was done pretending. She didn't want her old job back. She wanted the company to feel her absence. And by the look of things, it already did. At 6:13 a.m. on Saturday, an encrypted Proton mail pinged her inbox. Subject: intro on behalf of Silveridge Capital Partners. Clara rubbed the sleep from her eyes, read it twice, and set her coffee down. It wasn't from Silveridge directly, it came through a boutique advisory firm known for handling delicate transitions when high-profile deals needed to change course without rattling markets. Translation Silveridge no longer trusted the board, and they wanted deniability until they were sure she'd answer. She waited exactly 40 minutes before replying long enough to let it simmer. Her response was short, polite. I'm open to a conversation. Under NDA location of my choosing. They agreed within the hour. By Sunday afternoon, she sat in a minimalist conference room in a downtown co-working space, all frosted glass and exposed brick across from a man named Elliot. Late 40s matte suit, expensive watch, sharp eyes like someone who'd read The Art of War cover to cover twice. He didn't waste time. Off the record, Ms. Morales, we believe your termination was premature. The current deal is on life support. The models we reviewed last week don't meet diligence requirements. Clara said nothing, only nodded once. We'd like you to walk us through the original data. Quietly. Just us. No company involvement. And if I refuse? She asked. Then the deal dies, he said without blinking. She didn't smile, but she didn't say no. The NDA was ironclad. Priya saw to that. Clara's terms were blunt. No licensing, no reuse, no implied access. This wasn't a job interview, it was a surgical consult. A one-time walkthrough at 5 times her old hourly rate paid up front. They agreed without hesitation. The next morning, she arrived with her laptop, 2 encrypted drives, and the calm of someone with nothing left to prove. For 3 hours, she walked them through the numbers, the simulations, the red flags Nathan had missed, ignored, or replaced with glossy clip art. She didn't rant or editorialize, just presented the math like gospel, letting the silence afterward serve as the indictment. When it ended, Elliot extended his hand. You built all this? All of it, she replied. He hesitated, then added, off the record. We're not just considering pulling our investment, we're considering reallocating it. New vehicle, smaller, smarter. A fund that needs a CFO with technical depth and institutional memory. Someone who builds guardrails while others chase flash. Clara let that settle. You're offering me Nathan's job? She asked, almost bored. Elliot shook his head. No. We're offering you something he was never qualified for. She didn't answer right away. She packed her drives, zipped her bag. Outside, a breeze kicked up, sending a few dead leaves skittering across the sidewalk. Clara paused, eyes scanning the Chicago skyline. She felt no triumph, only clarity. The game had shifted. And for the first time in months, it was on her terms. Clara didn't feel triumph. She felt clarity. Years of being the safety net, the one with contingency plans no one read until too late, had flipped. Now they were falling, and she was on solid ground. At 8:00 a.m., sharp, Priya sent the final cease and desist. No pleasantries, no hope. This finds you well, just the sharp weight of legal precision aimed at the jugular. As of today, your organization is instructed to cease all use, derivative, reference, or representation of Ms. Morales's proprietary financial modeling frameworks. Further attempts without licensing constitute actionable infringement under federal IP law. Consider this your final notice. Subject line, 5 words: cease, desist, retract. Immediately. It hit inboxes like a pipe bomb. By noon, the board convened in the 19th floor glass conference room. Clara wasn't there. She didn't need to be. Her name was printed on every page of the agenda. All 5 items were damage control. Nathan entered as if the brakes hadn't failed, jaw tight. I believe Ms. Morales is bluffing, he said, arms crossed. Margaret from legal didn't look up. She's not. It's boilerplate. Nathan scoffed. No, Margaret replied, meeting his eyes. It's copyright filings, trademarked logic trees, time-stamped protocols filed under her LLC before she was terminated. A heavy exhale, a muttered, oh my God. Mark, an early board member, slammed his laptop shut. This is malpractice. The entire investor round is based on stolen scaffolding. If Silveridge finds out, they already have Margaret cut in. I walked them through her original numbers yesterday. Under NDA. Nathan paled. Miles away, Clara sat on her porch feet, a bowl of cherries in her lap, watching storm clouds roll over the Chicago skyline. She didn't need live updates. The fallout would arrive on its own. Back in the boardroom, Rachel, a newer member, pushed back her chair. We were told she was overly technical replaceable. Is this what replaceable looks like? Silence? Someone from strategy whispered about salvaging the deal. But Clara knew the scaffolding was gone. The structure would keep tilting until it fell. One board member finally asked if Nathan had anything at all proving they had rights to Clara's model logic. He didn't. He couldn't. She had never signed it away. Half the board stood then not in protest or solidarity, but in resignation. Coats over arms, they walked out with expressions blank from the weight of corporate dread. The kind that comes when you realize the empire was built on sand and the tide is already in the lobby. Nathan stood alone, hands slack at his sides. Across town, Clara bit into a cherry, watching the juice stain her fingers red. No speech, no victory lap, no triumphant music. Just silence. Ruthless, exquisite silence. Her presence hadn't returned to the company. It had ruptured it. And she didn't even need to be in the room. At 4:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. No caller ID beside a half-finished notebook cooling tea, and an unsent email draft titled, "What I Should Have Said to Nathan." She let it ring twice before answering. "Clara Morales," she said, voice calm, posture instinctively straightening. Elliot came the reply. "No pleasantries, just focus." "Got a minute?" "Depends," she said evenly, calling from Silveridge. A pause. No. Something new. He didn't circle or pitch. "We're building a new fund, smaller, leaner, built on rigor, not branding. Real due diligence. Real guardrails. You're the first call for our founding advisory team." Clara stayed silent. "We don't want another Nathan," Elliot continued. "We want the person who built a bulletproof model that kept 3 capital rounds clean. The one who embedded clauses before anyone thought to ask. The one who didn't fight to stay in a broken system. She let it fall, then caught the pieces." Clara stared out the window. The Chicago sunset fractured into gold across the skyline. Her laptop sat open on the coffee table, one tab frozen on Grant and Lynn's homepage. The logo flickered like it was taunting her or begging. She closed it. "What's the role?" she asked. "Founding strategic advisor," Elliot said. "Equity package, discretionary bonus pool. We'll build it around you." Clara didn't smile. Not yet. Clara walked into her kitchen, reached for the bottle of wine she'd been saving since her last raise, the one Nathan canceled without explanation, and popped the cork with a slow, satisfying twist. "I assume," she said, pouring a glass, "this includes full control over financial modeling protocols and investor-facing risk simulations." "Total autonomy," Elliot confirmed. "We want to work with people who understand substance, not flash." She raised the glass, took a deliberate sip, and let the moment land. "Toss me a term sheet," she said. "Let's talk numbers." Elliot laughed low and relieved. "I'll have it to you by end of day." The call ended. Clara returned to the couch, opened her laptop, and created a new tab, a clean page. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as the old company's logo, pixelated and bruised from its unraveling, blurred into memory. She opened the file for her new consultancy. The title appeared in bold, crisp letters, no fluff, just substance. This wasn't about winning. It was about being done asking for permission. She had spent 12 years building foundations others had taken for granted, watched them trade rigor for aesthetics, and seen the cost firsthand. Now the architecture of her future would be built on her terms alone. Her consultancy wouldn't just model risk, it would define the standard. Every clause watertight, every projection defensible, every safeguard immovable. She wouldn't work for people who needed convincing that guardrails mattered. She would work with those who already knew. Clara leaned back, the faint hum of the city filtering through her open window. Somewhere in the Grant and Lynn Tower, panic still rippled. Meetings were being called. Strategies were being rewritten. Careers were tilting. She swirled the wine in her glass and typed the first line of her new firm's charter. By the time she hit save, the only thing left of the old chapter was a lesson and the leverage she'd carried out the door. Now she didn't just hold the terms, she wrote them. And somewhere she knew her ex-boss was already feeling the tremor. You've just heard my story. I'm Clara Morales, and I spent 12 years building the foundation of a company that thought I was replaceable. They wanted flash over substance, charm over compliance, vibes over guardrails, and you saw how that turned out. If you've ever been in my shoes, overlooked, underestimated, or shoved aside by someone who thought they knew better, then you know the quiet fire that keeps you moving forward. That's why I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me your story. Tell me how you prove them wrong, how you turn the tables, or maybe how you're planning to. I'll read them. I'll respond. Because we learn from each other's battles. And if you believe experience matters, if you believe people like us shouldn't have to beg for a seat at the table we built, then hit that like button and subscribe. It doesn't cost you a dime, but it tells the world that our voices matter, that we won't be pushed out quietly. Here's the truth I want you to take with you. Never hand over the keys to your value. Your knowledge, your methods, your relationships, those are yours. Protect them. Document them. If you can build them in a way that no one can use without you, that's not selfish. That's self-respect. And when they decide they don't need you, don't chase them. Step back. Let their choices speak for themselves. Because if you've built something solid, the cracks will show the moment you walk away. Support each other. Share your lessons. Stand your ground. And remember, sometimes, the best revenge isn't fighting to stay. It's building something better without them.